Hello, it's Rob Watson for Decentered Media, and this is the first of a new set of vlogs on a new YouTube channel that I've set up, which I'm going to post to occasionally for Decentered Media. So the idea is just to kind of give some thoughts and some explore some ideas about community media and the role that community media and media has as what I'd call a form of social value communication. So what do we mean and how do we link our community and social development processes with and through our media? So what I thought I'd do was just really kind of a couple of times, maybe each week, or maybe it depends how many opportunities I get to do this. But every now and again, I'll share some ideas on something I've read or something I've seen online, and just talk for a few minutes about why I think that's important, what the opportunities are, that whatever it is that catches my attention, or why it's relevant to the development of community media. So this week, saw the launch of a report from United for All Ages, which I've printed off and had a read, called Together in the 2020s. And you can find this report via their website, which is unitedforallages.com. And it's produced by Denise Burke and Stephen Burke. Actually, the report written by Stephen Burke, who are a kind of they describe themselves as a think and do tank, which I like that phrase. But what they're discussing in the report is the way that the UK has become, over the last 30 years, a very age-segregated society. And there's less opportunity for intergenerational mixing. And you really do notice the difference sometimes when you visit other places. So last year I was lucky enough to be in Siena in Italy, and I was very surprised that they've got the climate, but 10 o'clock on a Saturday evening the town square was full of families, small children and grandparents, all walking around, chatting, playing as well. It wasn't it wasn't a kind of regimented interaction. It was very open and friendly and welcoming. And yet when I come back to the UK and walk around Leicester city centre at 10 or 11 o'clock on a Saturday evening, you really wouldn't want to bring your granny, and you really wouldn't want to bring any small children, because it's dominated by, fairly raucous drunks and lots of loud music and things like that. Anyway, that's maybe my prejudice, but for me, it kind of illustrated one of the problems that actually in the UK we've maybe lost that intergenerational social connections. And what this report talks about is the kind of challenges and what the opportunities are to develop a different way, or to return to a different way of doing things. So the report kind of sets out some recommendations about what we really mean by intergenerational fairness, and how we can look at the way that families can intermix and have more regular contact. And it also thinks about what are some of the things that drive that kind of change. So it's a range of things like our employment practices. People have to move away from the local, family networks, and to get employment you have to go and work in a more distant city or town, and that the housing situation is kind of very divided, and the inequality of housing now, and certainly intergenerationally, where there's a generation with lots of assets that are locked into their housing, and then there's a generation which aren't able to get into onto the housing ladder and kind of participate in that kind of wealth creation through housing, but then also our learning services and things like the loss of adult education. And there's a report out the other day that the UK has the lowest number of people in Europe who are engaged in formal and informal adult learning opportunities. So it's kind of, is this based on a kind of a sexist and a stereotypical view of older people and younger people, or is this something that, if you like, is structural within the economy and within our society? So it's a very interesting report, thought-provoking report, to get ideas. Kind of certainly got me thinking. I was quite pleased to kind of see it, and some of the recommendations I think that kind of have caught my attention was something like setting up a department for social connection. I think that's an excellent idea. It's actually, we don't pay enough attention to those things which promote. It's the very intangible. Those things, I've experienced this before if you listen to some of the Decentered media podcasts. We've talked about this a lot in terms of having opportunities to have conversations and to engage in social interaction without it having to be, one, based around alcohol or expensive food, or two, based around if you like a taught course that you have to go and get something out of it. Just hanging out together in a relatively free and open way is quite difficult to do sometimes. The other one I like was the idea of kind of looking at the role of care homes. Now we have a kind of a crisis of care. It's all political parties talk about this, but we've seen little in the way of tackling the problem. But maybe we're thinking about it the wrong way. And both with our schools being regarded as community spaces, this report says that we should look at our care homes as community spaces as well. And I was really struck when I was in Totnes and I spoke to Life Care Radio about the way that they use radio as a medium to bridge some of the gaps and some of the divides between people who are effectively warehoused in care homes and don't have very much social interaction. And it's about, as this report indicates, about training and learning together and kind of co-producing and co-thinking about solutions. The challenge is quite considerable in the UK because, and this was recognised in 2018 with the civil society policy that Theresa May put forward, that we are facing a kind of a very steep hill to climb to tackle the problem of social anxiety and loneliness. And I think maybe it's often the case that we just need to step back a little bit and kind of rethink these through, some of these issues through, because, and I'll quote this bit, the benefits of mixing are wide-ranging for individuals, communities and our country as a whole. These range from improving the quality of life, health, care, housing and learning for individuals to tackle some of the bigger social and economic issues facing Britain, from loneliness and ageism to social division and inequality to planning for future generations. Now, one of the things, it's mentioned briefly, but the report doesn't focus on something which is I'm particularly interested in, which is community media, and how can we use things like radio, traditional, it's not very sexy, is it? Kind of AM radio, and yet it's still very cheap and very effective to help people bridge those isolation gaps in our communities. It's still a very good way of having engaged conversations with people. Not everybody is going to be watching a YouTube video, but you can listen, and you can listen to conversations on the radio, and hopefully it could be used more purposefully, particularly when you look at examples of community media practice that brings people together from different generational groups, so older people working with younger people, and it has the potential of promoting and supporting a shared experience. So even if it's talking about music and kind of playing music in a shared environment, there is an interest, and when you get people together, something interesting happens. But it's very difficult to do, and sometimes it's very difficult to kind of bridge some of the preconceptions that people have about older people or younger people. My particular age means now that I'm moving into a kind of middle age kind of mindset, and I find a younger mindset to be a bit more strange than I've previously been able to kind of hang on to in the past. But that's just intergenerational change. That happens. You can't get away from that. And we should be celebrating it, and we should be supporting it. There's a podcast I listened to by Michael Meads, and he says many people get older, but they don't become elder. And what he means by that is that as our hair turns white, we should also be wiser, and we should be passing on our wisdom. But too often we're kind of segregated into just being, just being older, just being people who are acknowledged for the number of years that they've lived and the miles that they have on the clock, if you like, but they're not necessarily having to contribute and nurture and support the next generations who need to come through. So it's kind of, we live in a very kind of segregated society. And so it's really interesting to read this report and find out more about it. I'm going to try and get in contact. I've messaged Stephen to say that it'd be great if we could organise a podcast at some point, so we could go into a bit more detail about it. So just if you go to unitedforallages.com, you'll be able to download a copy of the report from there. This is a vlog for Decentered Media, which is, if you go to decentered.co.uk, I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram at Decentered Media. So you can send me a message via any of those, or if you want to get in touch with me via YouTube, just leave a comment in the sections below. This is the first one. I'm going to try and do more. I'll tidy up the study at some point. I'll figure out what to do with all of this kind of YouTube things as I go along. But until next time, have a great time.